You are being manipulated. The very wiring of your brain is being used against you. We live in an attention economy, and every second of your attention counts, so people have developed a robust system for attracting and retaining your attention. Some are nefarious actors, some are educational YouTubers, some do it intuitively, and some have intentionally studied techniques. These techniques are present everywhere from Instagrams and TikToks to MSNBC and Fox. I think that you deserve to be an educated consumer with a modicum of control over your own attention, and that's what I'll provide today. I'm going to peel back the curtain and expose the secret tricks influencers, marketers, activists, and successful YouTubers use. What you do with that information is up to you. Maybe you'll retake control of your time instead of endlessly scrolling. Maybe you'll use what I'm about to explain and go viral in 2025. But either way, the choice will be yours. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania and decades of experience teaching people about unconscious bias, or if you prefer, because bias has become politically skunked, implicit cognitive processes. Today, I'm going to show you the matrix. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is Language Jones. Before I get started, I want to point out something that's often overlooked. These techniques are an application of simple facts about how our minds work. They take advantage of the mental grooves we most easily fall into, but they're not inherently good or bad. And as the video continues, it's going to get weirdly meta. In fact, at the end, I encourage you to watch the video again and see just how many of these techniques I'm using right now in my educational YouTube channel about linguistics. It's a channel dedicated to sharing knowledge and cultivating self-improvement. But my audience has grown, and I've gotten compliments on how my channel has improved since I started using more of these techniques more consciously and more deliberately. You're not going to be able to unsee these, so be forewarned. Ready? Let's dive in. This is not an exhaustive list, and in fact, there are a lot of non-linguistic techniques too, so I'll add a few of those at the end as a bonus, by the way. First, before you even watch a video, there has to be something that makes you want to engage with that video and not others. The amount of time people put into their titles and thumbnails is insane. In fact, some of the most successful YouTubers spend far more time on titles and thumbnails than actual content. Part of it's just pitching the thing that you're interested in to a broader audience. So for instance, last week's video of mine could have been simply titled Resyllabification. But be honest, would you click on that? Are you searching for that? No. Even let me tell you about resyllabification would be better, but I guarantee it did even better because I called it the simplest way to improve foreign language comprehension that no one is talking about. Resyllabification is inherently interesting and cool, but it's on me to make it sound interesting and useful to you with an application you might actually care about. Audience design isn't nefarious. I'd argue not having audience design borders on malicious, but I've sat through too many conference talks, and that's my academic conference trauma rearing its head. Once a creator has a vague topic idea, it's time to do keyword optimization. Do you know the number of searches per day for resyllabification? It's so low it breaks Google. There's actually 24,000 total hits on Google for resyllabification. Listening comprehension, though? 109 million hits. There are tools for this like Google Analytics and TubeBuddy and others, and you can spend forever tweaking titles and comparing them just based on what people are searching. But that can only get you so far. And it's better to actually just punch someone in the brain. Did that get your attention? Let me explain. We react to different words differently. Literally different parts of our brain light up. There's tons of research in neuroscience and in psycholinguistics that indicates that swear words, for instance, actually really light up our brains in a way that function words like the just don't. You felt it, didn't you? Even though I said function. Some words just have higher valence. In this sense, it means how much arousal it triggers. Do I mean sexual arousal? Well, I don't not mean that. But that's also not all that it means. Arousal is anything that gets a physiological reaction, which can be narrowed pupils, sweaty palms, increased heart rate, blood flow away from the extremities, and even a hormone change like a cortisol and adrenaline dump. Imagine you wake up in the middle of the night to a noise, and when you sit up, there's an unfamiliar, shadowy figure standing in your doorway. Boom, physiological arousal. Of course, it can be less dramatic and even be just a cascade of brainwaves that's a little more excited. So yes, sexy stuff absolutely does the trick, but it's only one of a few kinds of things. Those of you who are already familiar with the channel will know that I use this when memorizing new words by kicking my amygdala into gear with what I call naughty mnemonics. That's sex, violence, fear, or strong emotions. They could be things like contentment, but it's honestly more effective to use disgust and terror. So depending on your phonoaesthetic orientation, moist is basically a 2-for-1. I'll take a brief pause here so you can ruminate on how engagement through disgust and terror applies to cable news, for instance. This is why you see videos with words like shock and surprise and you won't believe, and so on. And paradoxically, it can be really subtle too. Even just using an intensifier like tremendous instead of good can have an impact. Some of you are old enough to remember the early clickbait from Pimsleur. Language professors hate him because of this one weird trick. More on that one weird trick in a second, by the way. As an aside, Paul Pimsleur was a professor of linguistics at UCLA and Ohio State. Given how toxic the field of linguistics is, it's actually highly likely that linguists hate him. But linguists hate everybody, most especially other linguists, although many of them are just masking the hatred they feel for themselves. As an end to this aside, let me know if you want a review and dissection of Pimsleur products. There's some weird stuff going on there that's kind of interesting. So use words like weird, hate, fascinating, shock, surprise, explosion, failure, or even ponage. Ironically, because of semantic drift, you could even use mid now, which despite literally being from middle, now means bad, and therefore has negative valence, which can trigger arousal and curiosity. If this were a channel for lions and hyenas, I'd probably use Mufasa. But we're not lions, we're people. You can supercharge these. Use verbs and keep them active. So these will surprise you is better than these are surprising. Of course, you can use surprising as an attributive adjective and then work in another high valence verb like these surprising facts will shock you. Oh no. Oh, and there's a hierarchy of tenses, so present is better than future, future is better than past. This was shocking is in the past and like who cares? This will shock you is almost a veiled threat. Better get ready. In practice, this means writing for YouTube is the diametric opposite of writing for an academic journal. Most academic writing seems to insist on making things into clunky nouns or adjectives. So we don't say 3 unexpected ways noun phrases transform. We say a triumvirate of novel resyllabification strategies in the nominal domain. Blech. Side note, I got criticized in grad school for having writing that was too clear. And one person even called clear communication, and I quote, flashy, like in a bad way. So here I am. So if you're an academic and you want to effectively attract attention so you can educate, just do literally the opposite of everything you were taught. Think, how would I write this as a journal article? And then throw that in the garbage, light it on fire, realize you've got an unsafe condition in your apartment and toss the flaming garbage out the window, and do the opposite of everything you wrote. And write fast because the police are coming to investigate a possible attempt at arson. I already mentioned negative emotions, but they don't have to just be fear of a boogeyman and disgust. In fact, a really good one is preying on the fear of being left out, judged, socially ostracized, or kept out of secrets. Next time you scroll, notice how many videos are a variation of don't make this mistake. I even started this video with you're being manipulated. A great question to ask is by whom? Who do I want you to think is manipulating you, and why do I want you to think that? In fact, I'm the one doing it, but I can claim some shadowy cabal out there is the real danger. Did I call this very video Secret Tricks? Yeah. And that's an accurate description. This is as good a place as any to stop and discuss the distinction between clickbait and audience design. I called this video Secret Tricks in part because it will light up your amygdala and you'll want to know the secrets. But, and this is hugely important, these actually are secret tricks and I am actually telling you what they are. So after the initial click, I've hopefully retained a few of you because I'm actually doing the thing the hyperbolic language promises. That's why people got annoyed at Pimsleur's linguists hate him. It set up an implicit question we want an answer to resolve the arousal. Hate has triggered. Why do they hate him? And the payoff is kind of boring, so we feel manipulated instead of good about having chosen to find out more. I'm running a risk here, but I'm going to trust you all. Leave me a comment and let me know if you feel like I'm delivering here. Is this a CTA? Yes. Will we talk about that in a minute? Also yes. Another technique is to use lists. For some reason, we really want to know what's on lists, and once you've heard a few items, you just really want to hear them all rather than leave. I absolutely fast forward through videos just to be like, what was the 4th secret technique? Bizarrely, this works even if the list is a list of 1. This one weird trick. That sounds like a quick fix, which is very promising. Lastly, before you've even clicked on the video, pronouns work. If you're playing the home game, I mentioned pronouns, so take a shot. You see this all the time with news stories now. For the younger viewers, this is a dramatic change, and us adults hate it. News headlines used to be something like, Minnesota woman secures large payout from insurers, but now she was afraid she wouldn't be able to pay for her health care, but then this happened. Click through on Apple News. Great. Now I have questions. Who is she? Why was she afraid? What happened? It's literally the opposite of delivering the news. It's delivering questions about the news to someone who hasn't read the news yet. It's also basically that secret knowledge thing just condensed into a linguistic structure. None of these are new. Some of you read a few hundred pages of garbage in high school just to answer, who is John Galt? So, book bait. Once someone has clicked through, if you want to keep them, you do, then you actually have to deliver on what you're going to say. For educational channels, this has the added element of explaining background knowledge and so on. But for most, especially self-improvement channels, you could just say the thing in like 3 minutes, but then you don't get a mid-roll ad. Remember clicking skip just a few moments ago? So they'll deploy a ton of techniques. Now, good writers and communicators use these too, but there's usually more substance to what they have to say. Some self-improvement YouTubers are all engagement techniques and almost no content. So the first is to lead with a colorful hook. That's a statement of the problem you're going to discuss, but without the solution just yet. You are being manipulated. A particularly effective engagement device is to frame it in terms of a narrative. Ask the audience to imagine a scenario, and then, even more effective, pose a question about it. Storytelling, rather than just an info dump, is almost always more interesting to people. Remember when you were in school and your professor diverged from teaching the content for that day and told you a story? One of my favorite memories from grad school was being in a phonetics class where we were doing, Fourier transformations and reading spectrograms and so on. And Mark Lieberman told a story about foraging for mushrooms in the forest in the USSR as a child. That stuck with me. And yeah, am I doing it right now? Yes, but because it works for making a more interesting video. It's letting the guard down for a bit. But storytelling can also be used to create metaphors that make a simple point more compelling. This is an ancient technique. Think about the Good Samaritan or the Prodigal Son. You probably know those stories, even if we're a little fuzzy on what the whole point was. Another device is a secondary hook and payoff. You can have these nested throughout a script. So I brought up Pimsleur and that one weird trick and said, more on that in a second. And then I delivered on it a while later when I explained that lists can be as little as one and we're still intrigued. I also did it when I mentioned visual, not linguistic manipulation, which will still be at the end of this video. The last one I want to discuss is the call to action. That can be the big usual things like and subscribe and leave me a comment for the algorithm and support the channel with super thanks or over at patreon.com/languagejones. And do those things, but it can also be as simple as asking you to imagine something as I tell one of those mini narratives. One of my favorite techniques, because it's so clever, is used by fitness influencers. The follow along. I'm going to release a follow along companion for this video if I can get around to it. But to give an example, I started a mobility program from StrengthSide. These guys make great content, and I feel that way because it's interesting all the way through and delivers on what they promise. But they have a follow along mobility routine that they recommend you do 3 times a week. Once in the first week, 2 sets in the second, 3 in the third, and 4 in the fourth. Following along is great for accountability, especially when you're holding a stretch. But also, let's think about this. You watch the video once to learn about the routine, and then if their plan works, you watch it again 3 times in the first week, 6 in the second, 9 in the third, and 12 in the fourth. That's 31 views for the same piece of well-engineered content. You see this in fitness, yoga classes, mobility, Pilates, bodyweight conditioning, etc., but also sleep and relaxation like yoga nidra or even language learning. All of these are reasonable. You get something out of the second viewing, just like you will if you watch this video again, like I asked you to in my call to action a few minutes ago. It's all connected. But that's also what's manipulated by, say, shorts that loop seamlessly or shorts that have some anticipated payoff, but it's like one frame and then you missed it and then you have to watch it again. In some cases, this is also to boost engagement. So if there's an image you want to tap on to maybe freeze the Instagram reel, but there's only a frame or so, you end up hearting or liking the content in your attempt to freeze frame, you thirsty hound. As I promised, I'll add a few of the visual cues here, and as a bonus for watching this far, I'll add a couple of best practices for managing your own attention. The visuals have an entire language, but the simplest takeaways I can give are that people react to faces and bold color contrasts. They react more to faces that are attractive, whatever that means to you, and more to attractive faces that are emoting strongly, especially if they're framed in thirds. Evidently, Mr. Beast, the YouTuber with a net worth of $500 million, has a handful of highly emotive pictures of himself that have tested well that he just cycles through. If there are words, they should be legible, related to the topic, and short, and at most like 5 words. Whenever I violate any of these principles, I see it in lower views. One last word on emotion. If you're making something, anger is dangerous. Yes, I might activate your amygdala by making an angry face in my thumbnail, but the end result may be the digital equivalent of fight or flight, where you pick flight by scrolling away. So let's say you want to have more of a say in your own attention. The best thing you can do is both be aware of these techniques and look out for them. There are tons of good creators churning out excellent content who use all of these. But there are also tons of shallow videos that use these without any substance, and when you recognize them, you can more quickly determine whether you're being manipulated into watching to the end for nothing. If I'm being honest, I sometimes still find myself watching to the end because the engagement drivers are so strong. We all do. A final thought is that it's worth asking, why am I being shown this and who benefits? Sometimes it's straightforward. Sometimes it's a group you don't particularly want to support or be manipulated by. Sometimes I don't have an answer, and that's when I tread with caution. A new one I haven't figured out yet is AI-generated thirst traps. Now, the way I'm wired, yes, I notice the simulacrum of an attractive woman, but I also notice that the outlets in the background are psychedelic and the shadows don't line up, or floor textures aren't quite right, or in some cases, lingerie just doesn't work the way articles of clothing do in the real world. Then the question is, who is behind this and why are they using a sexy simulacra to try to turn off my brain? If you know, leave me a comment. This isn't a call to action. I'm just really curious what's going on here. Anyway, joke's on them. Since 1999, I've been exceptionally wary of the woman in the red dress. Thanks, Wachowskis. If you liked this video, be sure to watch the play-by-play I'm releasing later, hopefully this week. It's a lot of editing work. And you can always support the channel right here with super thanks or over at patreon.com/languagejones. Actually, one more engagement driver that I didn't mention before, if you stuck around this long, is to intentionally make a mistake, usually like a typo, and then people will correct you on it and it drives the engagement. Super weird. Until next time, remain vigilant and happy learning.